You think you've figured her out. You've studied her words, her moods, her patterns. Maybe you've even memorized her love language, given her all the attention she asked for, played nice, stayed patient, and yet she still pulled away, still seemed bored, still wanted something more. That right there is the unsettling truth Freud stumbled upon over a century ago, the one that made even him uneasy. When he was asked what women want, this giant of psychology paused and admitted, "I do not know." And that's where most men get it wrong. They think the game is about answers, tactics, or strategies, but when it comes to female desire, the real game is built on mystery. Freud wasn't just being poetic. He was warning us that female desire is not linear, it's not mechanical, it's not a problem to be solved. It's an emotion to be felt, a puzzle to be respected, a dance you must learn to move with, not control. He saw it even then. How women's wants often didn't align with societal expectations, or even with their spoken words. A woman might say she wants security, but still fall for the dangerous man. She might say she wants kindness, but be drawn to emotional tension. The truth Freud exposed is this: a woman's desire does not obey reason, it obeys psychological depth. So when you, as a man, try to make her feel safe by being predictable, by always being available, by trying too hard to impress, you often unknowingly make yourself less desirable, not because she doesn't value your efforts, but because you've stripped away the one thing that fuels her deepest emotional engine: mystery. That's why the men she can't forget are not the ones who gave her everything, but the ones who made her feel something unexplainable. The ones who were emotionally present, yet psychologically elusive. Freud called it an enigma for a reason. Female desire operates below the surface. It's not just about sex or gifts or grand gestures. It's about what makes her imagine, what makes her guess, what makes her chase, even if just mentally. If she's never had to question how you feel about her, if she's never wondered what you're thinking, if you've never left room for silence, space, or intrigue, then you've never truly ignited that hidden side of her. And here's the kicker. The more you try to please her by bending over backwards, the more she senses that you are dependent on her validation. And nothing suffocates her desire faster than emotional neediness. You're trying to show love, she feels it as pressure. You're being transparent, she reads it as too easy. The unsettling truth? Women don't desire what they can fully predict. They desire what they can feel without fully understanding. So what should you do? Stop chasing clarity. Start creating emotional contrast. Be warm, but not always available. Be kind, but not always agreeable. Share, but not everything. Make her feel something between the words, because when Freud said he didn't know what women wanted, he wasn't saying it's impossible. He was saying it's not meant to be fully known. It's meant to be felt. And once you understand that, you stop asking the question, you start becoming the answer. If you really want to understand why women act like they don't know what they want, why their words often don't align with their actions, then you have to go back. Not just to childhood, but way back. Back to the moment society decided female desire was too dangerous to be acknowledged, too wild to be respected, and too powerful to be free, because that's exactly what Freud was uncovering in his most unsettling theory, the theory of repression. Think about this. For centuries, women were taught to suppress their desires, not just sexually, but emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. From the day they were old enough to understand shame, they were conditioned to present what was acceptable instead of what was true. And the more they hid their desires, the deeper they went. Into silence, into compliance, into a performance that became second nature. So when Freud started exploring the unconscious mind, what he found terrified people. He found that the polite, proper image women projected on the outside was often a mask for a storm of feelings beneath. Here's where it becomes crucial for you as a man to pay attention. That repression didn't disappear, it simply evolved. Today's woman may speak her truth more than ever before, but many still carry the psychological imprint of generations of silence. So she might say she's fine, but she's really simmering with unmet needs. She might push you away, but crave you at the same time. She might pretend she's in control, but long for a man who can match, contain, and awaken the parts of her she's been taught to hide. What does that mean for you? It means when you take her words at face value, you're missing everything that's being said underneath. She may reject attention in public, but fantasize about dominance in private. She may claim she wants a soft guy, but ache for the thrill of tension, challenge, and polarity. Why? Because repression didn't kill her desire, it directed it. It made it selective, hidden, and more psychological than physical. This is why so many men feel confused. You do what she says she wants and it doesn't work. You're kind, open, emotionally available, but her interest fades. You listen, validate, and show up consistently, and she drifts away. It's not that you're doing something wrong. It's that you're only relating to the surface of her, not the depth. And the depth is where her true desire lives. Freud tried to pull back the curtain to show that what society called hysteria in women wasn't madness, it was the pressure of being unheard, unexpressed, and emotionally caged. And here's the part most men miss. Women still test you to see if you're different. Not just physically strong, not just charming, but emotionally aware enough to recognize what's not being said. If she doesn't feel that you see her, not just who she presents, but who she hides, she will never fully desire you. She'll feel safe, maybe even comforted, but never magnetized. And that's why the men who provoke the most intense desire aren't always the nicest or most polished. They're the ones who challenge repression by creating space for truth through subtle tension, through emotional command, through a presence that invites her to drop the performance and step into her rawest self. So if you're still wondering why your efforts aren't hitting her heart, stop trying to please who she's pretending to be and start speaking to the woman she's never been allowed to show. Let's be honest. When most people hear the phrase penis envy, they laugh it off as one of Freud's most ridiculous ideas. And in some ways, the surface of that theory does sound absurd. But what if I told you it's not about anatomy at all? What if I told you Freud wasn't really talking about a woman wanting a man's body, but craving the power, freedom, and influence that society has always placed in the hands of men? This is where everything changes. You see, when Freud introduced the concept of penis envy, he wasn't just being provocative, he was observing a deeper psychological reality, one that most men still fail to recognize. Women didn't desire the male body, they desired the status, the voice, the dominance, and the psychological autonomy that the masculine symbol represented in a patriarchal world. And that realization should shake you. Because here's the secret most men never hear. Some of the most intense female desire doesn't come from sexual craving. It comes from the longing to be close to power. Not abusive power, not manipulative control, but stable, commanding, silent power that isn't easily moved. The kind of presence that cannot be swayed by emotions, doesn't chase validation, and doesn't apologize for being unapologetically masculine. Women don't want to be that man, but they do want to be close to that man. Because it awakens something that centuries of repression have buried, the longing to let go of control. Not because they're weak, but because modern life forces them to be in control all the time. And when a man enters the room with unshakable calm, with emotional clarity, with directional energy, he becomes the doorway through which he can release the weight of pretending, performing, or proving. So when you show up in her life trying to be sweet, agreeable, and overly accommodating, you may be kind, but you don't represent power. And no matter how evolved we pretend to be, that primal truth remains. Desire flows where power is felt. Not domination, not aggression, but emotional dominance, energetic groundedness, masculine self-leadership. You may think you're doing everything right, texting often, always available, expressing every feeling the moment it arises, but she feels it. She senses your emotional dependence, your need for her approval, and that energy doesn't pull her in, it pushes her away, not because you're not good enough, but because you don't mirror the internal structure she secretly longs to surrender to. When Freud said women envied the penis, what he may have really been saying is this: women long to feel what it's like to not need permission, to not be silenced, to not be passive participants in their own lives. And the closest they could get to that experience, psychologically, was being with a man who embodied it. That's why some women chase emotionally unavailable men. That's why they fall for the mysterious one, the one who doesn't over-explain, who doesn't rush to validate, who doesn't flinch when emotions rise. Because that man feels like something she's been chasing internally all her life, and in his presence, she doesn't just feel attraction, she feels relief. She feels permission to relax, to soften, to feel without filters. So stop assuming you need to impress her by being what she says she wants, and start becoming the thing she doesn't even know how to ask for, presence that radiates power without needing to prove it. Have you ever wondered why the guy who barely talks to her, the one who seems emotionally distant or even a little bit cold, still manages to keep her attention far more than the one who showers her with love, compliments, and availability? It doesn't make logical sense. It frustrates a lot of good men. But what you need to understand is female desire doesn't operate on logic. It thrives on tension. It feeds off the unknown. And that's exactly what Freud meant when he described how desire lives outside the boundaries of rational thought. When a woman says she wants a man who listens, who's kind, who's emotionally open, she's not lying. But those qualities don't necessarily spark desire. They might build trust. They might create safety. But they don't ignite the raw emotional craving that keeps her thinking about you at night. What does? The subtle presence of mystery, a psychological space that you leave open for her to walk into, question, explore, and never fully grasp. Most men are trained to seek attachment, to provide answers, to make sure she knows how they feel, where they stand, what the next step is. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When she knows everything about you too soon, when she feels like there's nothing left to figure out, her interest starts to fade. Not because you did something wrong, but because there's nothing left to feel curious about. And curiosity is the seed of desire. Women don't fall in love with men who lay everything on the table from day one. They fall for the man who makes her wonder what he's thinking, who gives her glimpses of emotional depth without fully unraveling, who listens carefully but never overshares, who feels close, yet just far enough away that she has to reach. That pull she feels, that's what keeps her interested. You don't have to be a jerk. You don't have to be emotionally unavailable, but you do have to stop being completely predictable. When you text her the same way every morning, when you give her the same emotional availability every night, when you explain every feeling you have without leaving room for her to feel anything first, that's when desire turns into obligation. Freud noticed something most people were too afraid to say out loud. Women were drawn to contradiction, the tension between emotional safety and emotional risk, between closeness and distance, between vulnerability and mystery. It's in that in-between space where her imagination wakes up, where she starts writing mental stories about you, where desire is born, not out of certainty, but out of speculation. That's why a man who can create emotional contrast becomes unforgettable. He's not just consistent, he's layered. He has moods, tones, energy shifts. One moment he's warm and engaging, and the next he's focused, unavailable, lost in his own world. That isn't a flaw, it's power, because it reminds her that she doesn't own you, that she has to earn more of you. And that dance, that sense of having to reach just a little bit, is where attraction lives. So stop explaining yourself so much. Stop trying to always be clear. Desire doesn't live in clarity, it lives in curiosity. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be intriguing. Let her chase the feeling of closeness. Let her feel the contrast. That's when she starts thinking about you in ways she can't even explain. You've probably heard the phrase, women are complicated, but that's not quite accurate. It's not that women are complicated, it's that most men are only paying attention to what's obvious, what's logical, what's spoken out loud, and that's exactly why they miss the most powerful force shaping female desire, the unconscious mind. When Freud introduced the concept of the unconscious, he was saying something most people weren't ready to hear, that what we do, what we want, and even who we're drawn to isn't always a conscious decision. It's driven by buried thoughts, hidden fears, deep fantasies, and emotional patterns we don't even realize are controlling us. And in the case of women, this is especially true when it comes to desire. A woman might say she wants one thing, but she desires something else entirely. Not because she's lying, but because the truth of her desire isn't always conscious. It exists in layers, and the deeper those layers go, the more powerful and more confusing they become. That's why she might find herself obsessing over a man who doesn't text back right away, even though she tells her friends she wants someone consistent. That's why she may fantasize about being pursued by a man who challenges her while simultaneously dating someone who's safe and predictable. On the surface, those desires don't make sense, but deep down, in her unconscious, they're completely aligned with the way her emotional world is wired. Her fantasies are rarely linear. They're not about the perfect guy saying the perfect words at the perfect time. They're about contrast, emotional tension, feeling wanted but not completely controlled, feeling seen but not exposed. She desires a kind of psychological seduction, where a man can meet her emotionally but still keep her intrigued. A man who's present but not fully predictable, who holds her in his gaze but doesn't collapse under her emotions. That's the theater of the unconscious. It's where desire comes alive, not in words, but in energy, not in facts, but in feelings. And the man who understands this stops focusing on trying to make her understand him. He starts paying attention to how she feels around him. He speaks not just with his words, but with his silence, his body language, his timing, his absence when it's necessary. Because here's the truth. She's not just listening to what you say. She's tuning in to what you don't say. She's interpreting how your energy shifts when she pulls away. She's noticing whether you hold your frame when she tests you. And those subtle cues, those are the real language of the unconscious. That's where she starts to trust you on a deeper level, not because of logic, but because of resonance. So the next time you're tempted to over-explain yourself or to clarify every feeling, stop for a moment. Ask yourself what kind of energy you're putting out. Are you a man who needs to be understood to feel secure? Or are you a man who trusts that his presence speaks for itself? Freud didn't call the unconscious dangerous for no reason. It's unpredictable, it doesn't follow rules, but that's exactly what makes it powerful. Because when you can speak to that part of her without even saying a word, that's when you're no longer just a man in her life. You become a feeling she can't forget. Most men think they're losing women because they aren't attractive enough, rich enough, or tall enough. But the real reason, what actually drives women away, is something far more subtle. It's a lack of depth, a lack of psychological presence, a lack of understanding about how female desire truly works. And here's the hard truth. If you ignore what Freud tried to teach us, you'll keep repeating the same cycle. Confused, rejected, and constantly chasing clarity that never arrives. Freud wasn't just some old man talking about dreams and symbols. He was uncovering the emotional codes that still drive human relationships today, especially the ones between men and women. And one of the most haunting things he revealed was that desire doesn't live in safety. It lives in the unknown, in tension, in emotional polarity. And most modern men have no idea how to hold that space anymore. We've been trained to prioritize emotional openness, to always communicate, to always validate, and while those things matter, they aren't what women crave at their core. What they crave is a man who knows how to feel, but doesn't drown in his feelings. A man who's aware of emotion, but not ruled by it. A man who can be close without being consumed. Because when you lose your frame every time she pulls away, when you rush to explain every silence, every change in tone, every emotional shift, you're no longer the grounded masculine presence she desires. You become another emotional task she has to manage. And that's when the attraction begins to die, not in a dramatic breakup, but in a quiet disconnection she can't even fully explain. That's why understanding Freud's work isn't about theory, it's about power. Power in the form of emotional intelligence, power in the form of psychological contrast, power in the form of non-reactivity. Women still respond to this, even if they can't explain why. It's primal, it's unconscious, it's timeless. When a woman feels you don't need to rush into her emotional world to fix or rescue her, she feels something rare, respect. She doesn't want to be rescued. She wants to feel seen without being smothered. She wants to be felt without being analyzed. And the moment she feels your calm in the face of her storm, she starts to trust you, not just as a man, but as a force. This is why men who move in silence, who don't explain every mood or emotion, who create subtle distance and don't apologize for it, often provoke deeper longing, not because they're toxic, but because they represent stability in a world that's emotionally chaotic. And that contrast between emotional chaos and masculine stillness, that's where desire lives. So many men today are addicted to reassurance. They want her to label everything. Are we okay? Are you still interested? Do you still love me? But every time you chase those answers, you're pushing her further away. Because women don't want to lead emotionally, they want to feel led. Not controlled, not dictated, led. And to do that, you have to embody presence, calm, mystery, certainty. Not in her feelings, but in your own self-worth. So if you want to be the kind of man she can't forget, if you want to be the one she keeps thinking about long after you've left the room, stop chasing understanding. Start becoming the thing she can't fully explain.